and welcome to Funny or Something. Today, I want to talk about writing, book writing. Well, I have decided a couple of months ago to start writing my first book, which is a fantasy book. I'm not going to talk about it, but here I'm going to actually give you some advice, some tips about writing a book and how it actually feels writing it. My first advice, and the most important one, is start writing. Right now, pause this video and go ahead and start writing your book. Go on your computer, your laptop, or anything, open Word or the Google Documents, and just at least write the title of your book. That's the most important thing. Just start writing. And before we continue with other advice, I have to say, if you like this video, leave a thumbs up. If you have anything you want to tell me, write it down in the comments. And if you think somebody else would find this video useful, send it to them. And now let's continue. So, like I said, I started writing a book a couple of months ago. But prior to that, for years, I had the idea of the book, the plot of the book in my head. So I was always daydreaming about, I was dreaming it, I always used my imagination. It was in my mind because it is a fantasy book about a world, a fictional planet, doesn't matter. Truly, it doesn't matter what the book is about. I can talk about what the book is about in a later video if you're interested, but I'm going to just give some advice. So it was always in my head, and I was like, one day I'm going to write it, one day that book is going to be the bestseller, one day Netflix and HBO are going to battle over my book, who gets to turn it into a movie or into a show. Like, it's going to be the next big hit, it's going to be translated into 300 different languages, it's going to be sent on the next NASA space mission, it's going to be so great. But it was just inside of my head, which was the problem. I was too afraid to actually start writing to show what I had in my head to the world. It was so much nicer to have it in my head, where it's like it's so packed nicely inside and I get to enjoy that world. It's so lovely. But I knew if I don't write it down that it's going to just fade away and that I'm barely going to remember it and it's going to be lost basically. So I decided that I'm going to write it down. First I started with some notes. I got a notebook and I started first writing some of the names of the chapters or the characters or important things. I also started sketching how the world is going to look like and started to work on the basic story tropes and the basic story beats and things about it. And that was actually very helpful because you shouldn't like immediately go ahead and write it. I mean, that my first advice when I said go ahead and write it, yes, do that. It's important that if you want to write a book, you immediately have to start writing it, because believe me, it's going to take you a lot of time. And it's much easier to go ahead and just change some things than to like just when they're already written, than to have to like always think about something, or if you forgot something. Yeah, that's the problem with writing. You have to write it all down, otherwise you're going to forget about it. And sometimes when you write it down, you actually see, oh, this doesn't work at all, this makes literally no sense, why did I ever think this would work? And then you realize that you actually had some flaws in your logic or in your story, and that's really great. So that's why it's important to write the drafts or to write notes about your book. You can always edit them, you can always delete them, change them, and that's a great thing because now you have it in the physical world. It actually exists. It's not in your mind where it can be changed and influenced easily. So yeah, start writing notes and drafts if you know how to sketch. It doesn't even matter if you do know how to sketch, you can still sketch things. For example, it depends on your book. You can sketch how the character looks, how the city looks, if you're talking about the city, how a certain scene would look, a continent, a planet. Doesn't matter what you are writing about, it's just important that you write it down so that you have physical proof, evidence that it exists. It's not just in your mind. And yeah, that's very important, and that's something that I learned, that if you don't write it down, it's going to go away. So then I sat down and started writing, and then you actually realize, oh, you have to first have a proper introduction. You can always decide on what your introduction is going to be. You have to add so many little things, and then when you're writing, you you of course know the world and know the characters by your heart because you invented them, but your readers don't. And then you have to think about it. I can't just introduce something in here and then never explain it. For example, if I'm talking about a magical dragon, then let's say, oh, a dragon flew by or something like that, and then I never mention the dragon again, and the people are like, wait, what's that dragon doing there? What's it about? You have to explain it. You have to start slowly, not that it's just boring, but what I mean by slowly, you need to introduce people into your world so that they are intrigued. So when they read it, they're like, oh, I want to find out more. But you can't just start something and the reader is confused and it's like, wait, what's going on? And what I noticed, a lot of those great writers in the world, of course, this doesn't have to be a rule. They always start, you know, kind of confusing. They start and the story is immediately starting. When you start reading it, the story is already going. For example, it starts, um, Michael was walking down the street, uh, and he passed next to his mother's house. Um, he didn't want to visit her. He was hurrying home to make dinner. And then that's how the story starts, and you're immediately like put in the you're immediately in the first gear. You're immediately experiencing the story, and later on it gets explained who's Michael, why didn't he want to go to his mother, but that's all in the introduction. You are not like confused the whole time, like, wait, who's Michael? It's like you read 50 pages and you still don't know who Michael is. You learn who Michael is in the first 2 pages and why he doesn't like his mother. But the beginning, the first sentence, is leading you into the story. You know, the rain, the rain was falling on the tilted rooftops of Amiria. The elves living in their small houses were all burning coal to stay warm on this cold night. Or something like that. It has to immediately take you into the story. You're not going to start like, oh, 3,000 years ago in a land far, far away, unless you're writing a fairy tale. In the kingdom of Aurelia, blah 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 blah, and you're like writing and writing and writing something that has nothing to do with the story. It's just filler information, and uh, the readers get bored with it. You have to catch their attention first. They have to be in the story, they have to be caught by the story, and that the story leads them through this world, and that the story explains the world itself. You can't just, it's not a Wikipedia article when you're just writing at first explaining something like that, and the, the readers are going to be like, yeah, but what does this have to do with anything? Everything, not everything. Most of the things you write have to be related to the story. You shouldn't talk about census information about the city of Aurelia if your character is only going to be in Aurelia for one day and then never go back to it. That's a thing. There's always going to be time to explain things, but you have to focus on the story, on the main plot. Otherwise, you're going to get too much distracted by other things. And One other advice I have, you don't really have to rush. For example, if you can't think of a name that's really good for a character, give them a random name, and then later on you can change it. Because when you're writing your character down, you do know some of their characteristics, their personality, but when you're writing them down, you of course change things, you edit them, and at the end they have a little bit of a different personality that fits better into the story. And then you can give them a name that is fitting for their personality. That was the thing with me. I started writing about these characters and I gave them some random names that were mostly related to how they physically look, because that's something that I had like set in stone. And then later, after they get some character development, after their personality gets more expressed, I gave them names that are more fitting for their personality. So that's the advice I have for all of you if you're thinking about writing. And this advice is more you can apply it on fiction or non-fiction. It's not that applicable to poetry and songwriting because I'm writing a book, not songs or poetry. And also one other thing, you all know the rule, show don't tell. For example, you shouldn't write down the night was scary. You need to write the night was dark and the fog was thick. You couldn't see anything in front of you. The trees howled and what am I saying? The wind howled through the trees. You know, something like that. You need to make that night scary. You need to make it scary. You need to show us that it's scary. You can't just say the night is scary. What does that mean? What's scary? What's scary for me is not scary for everybody. Like what are you doing? The readers shouldn't have to write their own story. You know? If you write something like that, if you want to say uh, the sun or she was happy. She was happy when she got her grade. That's just a normal sentence. That's an English assignment sentence. It's regular, nothing special. But if you write it down, when she saw the A, the good grade on her paper, her face, uh, I don't know, her face lit up from excitement or something like that. You need to show us that she was happy, that we can actually picture her in our mind that she was happy, like we're watching on TV. We need to see her being happy. When you just say she was happy, like that doesn't actually show us a picture of her. If you say she had a grin from ear to ear, her eyes were sparkling and things like that, we can imagine her, we can see her like she is on a screen, and that's important. Sometimes it's okay to tell things and to write them down. You don't have to always show them. But that's the thing about artistic and creative writing, we have to be able to imagine it. You know, you always have to write it that way that we can imagine it in our mind, like it actually exists, like it's on a screen, like it's in a movie, whatever you are describing. If you don't use those terms, if you just tell, then it's not poetry, it's not creative writing, it's not literature, it's like a scientific paper or it's like a news article. That's the difference between literature and all the other forms of writing. So that's all the advice I have for you today. If you're interested about my book, I can talk more about my book and its characters in a different video. Uh, that's all for today. Bye for now.